As beautiful as football is, the feeling of being cheated can leave a nasty taste in the mouth of the aggrieved party. And when I say cheated, I'm not talking about a throw-in decision going the wrong way. No, I'm talking about clear-cut robberies that change the course of an entire match. Trust me, Robin van Persie can tell you all about that. The Dutchman's moment of grief began with a Champions League encounter between Arsenal and Barcelona. At this time, Van Persie was one of the hottest strikers in the world, but unfortunately, Barcelona were also smashing everyone that crossed their paths. Sure, Barca didn't need the help of a match official to scoop the points, but on this day, things weren't going their way and the referee's help must have been greatly appreciated. Van Persie was through on goal, but he was slightly in an offside position. Not knowing that he was off, he proceeded to take the shot, but he did so barely a millisecond after the whistle had gone. And in a moment of sheer madness, the Arsenal man who was already on a yellow received a second yellow for going for goal after the whistle had been blown. A red card was shown, much to the displeasure of not only Arsenal fans, but to lovers of football around the world. At this point, Arsenal were 3-2 up on aggregate, but being a man down against a ruthless team like Barcelona meant they would crash out of the competition in the most dubious manner. But if you thought this referee was dubious, what would you say about Thierry Henry's dastardly handball against Ireland in a World Cup qualifying match? Sure enough, Henry was great at controlling the ball with his feet, but as we found out that day, he was also an expert in controlling the ball with his hands. The Frenchman received the ball on the left side of Ireland's 18-yard box, and knowing fully well he couldn't bring it down with his foot, he opted to use his hand instead. He then crossed the ball into the box, which led to a crucial goal for France that qualified them for the World Cup at the expense of Ireland. Henry's handball was as clear as day, but the referee turned a blind eye to it. Till this day, the Irish haven't forgiven Henry or the match official for their misdeeds. But to be honest, it isn't all robberies in football that stem from a suspicious refereeing decision, as some clubs have pretty much done the same thing. Leicester City are guilty as charged, as they sold Harry Maguire to Manchester United for a whopping £80 million. Now, if you aren't up to date with Maguire's current run of form, then you might be wondering what could possibly be wrong with a club selling a player to a willing buyer. Well, nothing actually, but in Maguire's case, the £80 million Leicester received from United proved to be a good business deal for the Foxes, but a terrible one for the Red Devils. Maguire has been a total flop for United, and many would agree that the £80 million paid for his awful services could have been used to renovate a section of Old Trafford instead. But how can we talk about robberies without mentioning one of the greatest heists of them all? This one involves none other than Diego Maradona, who broke English hearts in a World Cup knockout tie against England by knocking the ball into the net with his hands. The legendary Argentine player was a magician on his feet, and with his hands too. During the match, Maradona was on the end of a dangerous cross, which you would expect that he'd try to head into the net. But knowing he's not the tallest guy in the world, he decided to give himself the advantage of using his hands. He pulled it off brilliantly. The referee let the goal stand, and England were unfairly beaten. The next robbery incident also involved the England national team in a World Cup match, but this time the Three Lions were up against their bitter rivals, Germany. England were losing by a thin margin, and they needed to pull a goal back to get into the game. They kept on pressing the life out of the German defence until an opportunity fell for Frank Lampard. However, the chance wasn't as clear-cut as Lamps would have liked. He picked up the ball several yards away from the 18. His long-range chip was perfectly weighted, as it beat the keeper clean. The ball struck the underside of the top bar, bounced over the line, but unfortunately, it bounced back out. Lampard knew he had scored. His teammates knew he had scored. Even the German players knew he had scored. Unfortunately, the only person who felt otherwise was the referee, who turned a deaf ear to the appeals of the English players. Germany then went on to win the match and knock England out of the tournament. This was a very bitter pill for England to swallow, but certainly not as bitter as the one Manchester United forced down Arsenal's throat. Remember Arsenal's 49-game unbeaten streak? Yeah, it was the Gunners at their best, as they dominated the English Premier League all through the 2003 to 2004 season. They ran through the entire campaign without losing a single match, much to the displeasure of their major rivals, Manchester United. However, it was United who would break that streak the following season, although in the most controversial fashion. The two teams locked horns once again, But what Arsenal didn't know was that they were playing against the referee too. United's players were so unruly with their tackles that they should have had at least one man sent off. But no, the referee didn't give a crap about doing the right thing that day. And how can we forget Wayne Rooney's dive, which led to a penalty? I mean, if you're going to write an academic paper on poor officiating, then I recommend you use this particular match as a case study. But wait, this isn't even the worst instance of match officiating, as the referee in charge of the Chelsea vs Barcelona 2009 Champions League tie makes a strong but disgraceful case for himself. It was the second leg tie at Stamford Bridge, and Michael Essien had given Chelsea a well-deserved lead with a strike that shook the stadium to its knees. The Blues dominated the entire match, as they created chance after chance. Unfortunately, they failed to double or even triple their lead, and it was something they would later regret. The match was approaching the dying minutes, during which Chelsea had legitimate claims for a penalty, but the ref said no. And that was when Andres Iniesta scored the goal that left Stamford Bridge as quiet as a graveyard. Still, Chelsea kept pressing, and that was when Michael Ballack blazed a goal-bound shot which Samuel Eto'o blocked with his hands right inside the box. Yet, the referee refused to award Chelsea the penalty that would have sent them into a second consecutive final. Ballack nearly smacked the referee for not awarding what was a clear-cut penalty, and you can tell he was doing everything in his power to stop himself from taking a swing. The whistle was blown, Chelsea were knocked out on the away goals rule, and Didier Drogba summed it up by calling the officiating a disgrace. Now, there have been many painful robberies in football, but I doubt there's none as painful as the one Ghana had to endure against Uruguay in the 2010 World Cup quarter-final. This was the first time the World Cup was hosted in Africa, and continental teams were looking to shine on home soil. Host South Africa had been knocked out, along with the continent's other representatives. Ghana was the only African nation left, and they shocked the world by beating the USA to reach the quarters. African hopes were high at this point, and by none other than the infamous Luis Suarez. Yes, the Uruguayan striker had gone back to take on defensive duties, and as the shot flew towards his direction, he also took on the keeper's role by parrying the ball away with his hands. The penalty was awarded, but Asamoah Gyan blazed his kick wide. Uruguay went on to win the tie via penalty shootouts, and you could see how excited and on-looking Suarez was afterwards. Of course, he was sent off for handling the ball in the area, but it was well worth it, as his handball robbed Ghana clean of becoming the first African country to reach a World Cup semi-final. So guys, do you know of other robbery incidents in football? Be sure to drop your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel, because there's more awesome football content where this came from. See you in the next one.